So thanks everyone that was able to join us today. My name is Kevin Poppe with Control+M Solutions. Today's session, VisionPlex tricks for non-programmers. So our specific focus today, wanted to review VisionPlex concepts for non-programmers and introduce some bells and whistles of maintaining VisionPlex screens that will something that we would typically encounter over the course of needing to find reports and interact with different screens. So we'll introduce some common tasks and talk through how to make those changes in Classic and also UX. So the hope is that even if you're proficient in some basic Classic VisionPlex changes already, maybe you haven't been with the UX, the content that we review today, the way that it's organized, will help everyone pick up on some neat tips that you can go back to your organization and hopefully leverage for making some of these changes. To start off with, just kind of reviewing the content and the plan for the next hour, we'll talk through some basic security requirements and what the various different checkout levels that are available to us are. We will review how to find reports and determine, is something a good fit for my organization? And then once we've introduced that, actually how to publish the reports, make them available for others. Some common needs that we'll encounter: how do I enable new fields, new filters, download data into Excel, maybe do a little bit more analysis than the screen offers natively. We'll look at number formatting, how to do things like move subtotals and rearrange fields on the screen, renaming fields. So conceptually similar to glossarization, we'll talk about how to do that within a VisionPlex screen, and a couple of other tidbits to reference just regarding near real-time data and how we can determine that what the actual data source of a given screen is returning, and just some other tips about how to manage checkouts within your organization. So a lot of content to review. We will touch on Classic and UX, and also talk through doing these changes in a live demo. And then, of course, we'll save some time for your questions and answers at the end of the session. Okay, so with that being said, let's just talk about what VisionPlex is and what is offered to us in VisionPlex. It's different from a standard configuration change on any other normal screen that we're used to interacting with. So when we think about enabling settings, turning things on and off, typically settings are what you see is what you get, right? If you're on the part list in Classic or the parts page in UX, you can turn display settings on, and when that display setting is enabled, let's say, for instance, you're turning on the planner field for your organization. When you enable that setting, it displays on a certain location in the page, and we don't really have any flexibility as to how that can be rearranged, in the top left corner or the bottom right corner, or which sequence different columns display in. With VisionPlex, we do have a little bit more flexibility, so a lot of times that's a quick and easy change that you can make to help information be a little bit more relevant and easier to decipher for your organization based how your company structures information and wants to view and interact with different reports. So VisionPlex screens are a lot more configurable than standard screens in that respect. We can make those custom changes. Something beyond what we'll actually touch on today, just other neat tips about VisionPlex that we might look at doing a little bit more advanced session for later on down the line. Things like conditional formatting, adding custom expressions to do a little bit more arithmetic in certain grids, charts, charting functionality, and being able to have sort of tiered reports, meaning information from one screen can be passed into another. So say you're looking at high-level information and you want to click into the detail and see what made up a subtotal. Things like that are available through VisionPlex. So as we get started, just for everyone's awareness, the content that we will review today, to be able to manage the changes that we're going to be discussing, from a classic perspective, the permission that is required within the module VisionPlex, there's a permission called Design, and that allows us to get into design mode. And as you can see from the screenshot here, a quick and easy way to identify if a given screen is even eligible to be something that we can change in this nature. When you navigate to your hover menu, if a screen is a VisionPlex screen, there will be something in the pop-up menu that says VisionPlex Tools. And if you do have that design permission, you'll see an additional option as we're showing on the right, Design Mode. So Design Mode is what actually allows us to interact with the screen and make the changes that we're talking about. So just a quick awareness of how you can readily look at something and see if something can be changed and customized as we're showing today. So along the same lines in UX, when you click on the gears icon on any given report, at the very bottom, there will be an option that says VisionPlex Designer if a particular page is something that we can customize through VisionPlex. Now, the VisionPlex Designer option does only show up if you have the appropriate security. So if you notice the image on the left, if you do not have the appropriate security, you will not be able to just look at a screen and infer that, hey, this is a VisionPlex screen. So that is something that we can control with a security action. And on the UX perspective, there are actually a total of 50 different actions that control different pieces of functionality within VisionPlex itself. So UX is a lot more granular in that respect. And typically the way that we see this managed is all of the edit actions within the module VisionPlex, you would need to grant to anyone that wants to pursue making changes like this. So VisionPlex Designer is what you'll see, and that's what we're looking for. Okay, so checkout levels, something that is important to understand as we get started with the process of going about making design changes. Enterprise level checkouts will start from the most broad level here. So if there are multiple PCNs within your customer group, enterprise checkouts, when we make an edit to a VisionPlex screen in enterprise mode and check that back in, those changes will be made immediately available to each PCN within your customer group. Company level checkouts is something that's made on a per PCN basis. So there may be valid business reasons, right, to change certain things and only make them visible in a certain PCN. So that's why we would consider a company checkout. If there's specific processing differences, we don't have to impact the screen for everyone in the organization, just a certain PCN. Personal level checkouts, that's something that we would typically only see be used when you're initially making a change. Maybe you want to save it over a period of days, schedule a meeting and demonstrate what the screen will ultimately look like to others in your organization. And then once we get buy-in, you would make the change at the company or enterprise level. As a best practice, we like to recommend enterprise changes wherever possible. That way that, who knows what's going to happen later on down the line. Maybe your organization goes through a merger, right? And multiple PCNs come online. So making changes at the enterprise level makes user organization that baseline when those new PCNs come online, that all of the screens available will be in sync. And then if there is a valid reason to make company-specific changes, those can be made at the company level. In UX, the checkout feature works pretty much the same way. There's one additional option, though, in UX that is really nice to have. So in UX, notice there's an on behalf of option. And the way I like to describe that is, let's say that you have a screen that returns, let's say you have a screen that likes to return sales order history, and customer service people in your organization use that screen a lot. Also, perhaps the president of your organization likes to consume the information on that screen, but maybe the president is only interested in high-level information of count of orders or dollars over the course of time and doesn't need the detail. So you could conceivably make an on behalf of checkout for the president of your company and group things by customer so that you're not showing the detail on that screen for that particular individual. So from an administration standpoint, it allows you to consolidate the number of screens that would ultimately be published and make on behalf of checkouts for different individuals if you need to go that route. So a nice feature to have that Plex has added to UX. Okay. Next up, how do I actually discover what's available to me and determine if something is a good fit for my company? Using the VisionPlex screen list, we can search and find all the reports that Plex has made available to us. So a common way to search using this screen is by module. In this particular case, what's shown on the screen, I'm showing a search for a particular report. In most cases, when you're looking for reports for a given area, you want to see everything that's available and then sort of narrow down from there. So a common way to use this would be to search by module. In this case, the module would be production tracking, and you can search and see everything related to production reporting. On the filter box, we also see an option for layout. And if you'll notice on the right-hand side of the page, there are a few different options. Standard grid is what you're going to want to set the filter as when you're initially looking for screens. Standard grid basically just means the column format of the grid with a filter box at the top. That's how all reports are developed from Plex. The other options are specific to different pieces of functionality where Plex can deploy VisionPlex screens. Say if you're adding or updating records within other modules, those aren't necessarily relevant to us when we're searching for reports, right? So the layout option, standard grid, that's where we're going to see anything that would be relevant to us from a reporting perspective. And to actually see what the report contains and be able to run that report from the screen list, we can just click into the hyperlink to the screen and start to interact with whatever that screen has available to it. And we'll talk to that during the live demo as well. Okay, so let's say that you have found a report and it seems to be returning exactly what you need. It's a good fit for your organization. To actually make that report available to others, and again, this is more of a security type exercise. If you have the permission that would enable you to add menu nodes within Classic, you would navigate to the specific menu where you want that page to display and press Add Node. And that would allow you to reference the Plex name of the VisionPlex screen that's shown in the action section. And then you can give it a name internally, however you'd like to refer to it. So what's shown up above as the daily shift report, that would be the internal name. And just as a best practice, what we like to encourage is keeping the internal name in line with how Plex named the screen. And if there is any additional comments that you'd like to add to it to kind of help your users out and understand maybe what content this report has, the subtext option that's shown is a good tool to do that. In UX, the same screen exists that allows us to search and find everything that's available. So VisionPlex Screens is the name of the menu. And from this page, we can search and find using the same tools. So module isn't shown on this particular screenshot, but module is something we can filter by on this page as well. In this particular case, we know the name of a report, so we're just searching for daily shift, and that allows us to launch that particular report in design mode. And from there, there will be an option on the gears menu to run the screen and actually type in dates into the date filter and press search and see what sort of information that report is returning for us. So once a report has been vetted in UX and you like it, you'd like to enable it and have others interact with it, the way that we do that is through the reports menu. So as shown here, once we've menu searched for reports, there is an option within the action bar that allows you to see all available reports. And a key thing to understand is all reports in UX are disabled by default. So you have to opt in to specific reports and turn them on for your organization. So this is a great way to actually search and find what's available and begin the testing process. So as it's shown in the bottom right, a typical way that we would do this, if you're just trying to discover what's available to us initially, we would do something like this on test so that maybe you don't clutter up your reports page with reports that aren't relevant for your organization by turning on things that we won't ultimately use. And once reports are enabled, they're accessed through menu search. So you can menu search for whatever the report name is, and the report will show up. Okay. So when you are in design mode, one of the more common needs that a lot of people would have a need to be able to do is turn on different stuff, right? So what's available to us? How do we enable more filters, more columns, get more data from the screen? So a quick visual indicator of what is available to us, if you notice, on this particular screen, the daily shift report, this is a view of when we're in design mode. And again, we'll show all this later in the session. Work Center Group, it's shaded in a dark gray color, right? So anything that's dark gray is not currently displayed on the screen when someone is running a report and using that to search. So to actually enable the filter, what we would do, you can either double click on the field or right click on that particular field, and a pop-up menu shows up that allows us to edit that particular field that you've selected. And in this case, all that we need to do to make this new field available is set the visible property to true, and then that filter will be available when we run this report. along the same lines, to enable a new column on a report, looking at the grid as opposed to the filter box, there will be some various different columns that are gray, if there's anything that's available for you to turn on the grid and enable new columns. So to enable new columns to the search grid, we would do the same thing. We would right-click on a particular field and set the visible property to true. Another common request that is not something that's enabled by default: how do I get this information in Excel, right? So the download option is shown here. So when in design mode, in the top left where the download button would normally be on the screen, on all VisionPlex screens, there will be an option to click on this download option. And to make it visible when you actually run the screen and want to return something to Excel for additional analysis, we set the visible property to true on that button, and then it will display so we can actually pull data and look at things from that perspective. Other fields that are available. So sometimes over time, when Plex updates the data source to add new columns, there may be things that are not enabled by default. So the way that we determine that is on the right-hand side of the screen when you're in design mode, there's an option that says panel. When we click on the panel icon, there will be two tabs, one that shows additional filters and additional columns that we can enable. And to turn on a new filter or to turn on a new column, you simply check the box and press update. And then when you launch that screen in run mode, it will show that new field that you turned on. Okay, so the same concept applies within UX, but to actually enable a filter process is a little bit different. So in UX, when you are in design mode and click on any particular field, we see this red dashed outline that the field is sort of highlighted with, right? So once a given field is selected, on the right-hand side of the page, there's a properties panel. And in UX, the properties panel for each field allows you to control all the various different elements of how that piece of information can be formatted. So in this particular case, what we saw in Classic was a drop-down. In UX, to make something visible, there is a checkbox. So we set the visible property to true or checked, and that filter would now show when you run that particular screen or report. Enabling new columns. So on the left-hand side of this particular image, you see labor efficiency. So because of the color, we can infer that that column is already enabled on the report. Some of the columns that are shaded in that dark gray color, those are things that are available to us, but not yet enabled. So to enable something, again, we click on the column, and that gives us the properties panel, and we set the visible property to yes. In UX, the export and download, conceptually that behaves the same way, and there's not a separate download and export function in UX. So in this particular, for instance, let's say that it's a report that it's not just something that we want to download, but we want to make sure that this report is printable. So on the action bar, each of the various different options that are available have the same properties panel that we saw at the field level on the previous options. So similar to how we would turn on a filter or turn on a new column, once we've selected that action on the action bar, we set the visible property to checked, and then when we launch the screen, that would turn the print option on for us. Being able to see what fields are available in UX. So from a data source perspective, what other columns may be something that Plex has published to this report that aren't showing on the grid right away. The way that we uncover that sort of information, once you click and highlight the entire search grid, so as shown here by number 1, the red dashed line shows up around your entire search grid, and then on your properties panel on the data tab, all the fields that are available in this Plex data source will show. So anything that's not displayed as a column, you could potentially choose to opt in and display that column on the reports. Okay, so we reviewed some common ways to turn on some different fields. Another common request that we encounter a lot is numbers formatting. So by default, if something is a number or text, maybe the display is a little bit confusing and not easy to read. So in this particular, for instance, we see that this is just a snapshot of the daily shift report that we're going to look at here in a little bit. On part VM 25601, the parts produced was 1,200 over some particular date range. So when you're looking at 4-digit numbers, it would make sense to have that have a comma display there, right? So it's a little bit easier for people to read. So the way to do that, when you're in design mode, if you right-click on the field, there is an advanced option that shows up, and the output format is what we're interested in setting. So in this case, it's production quantity. We're going to set that to an integer, and when the screen is run, the system knows to display that as a number, and if it's 4 digits or beyond that, a comma would now display in that particular field. Keep in mind on this particular example, so we made the change at the field level, and it did not impact the subtotal. So what's shown in blue, the 2452 number. So we could do that same change at the subtotal element and make sure that the output format on the subtotal is also set to be an integer. In UX, similar approach. So let's say that we're going to make that same change on this exact same screen in UX. So the parts produced column. In this case, though, notice we have selected the actual label within the column. So that's a key distinction there. So there's properties of the field itself, and there's properties of the label. You want the properties of the label. And once we have the label selected, there is a format style, and we set that to be integer. And then when you run the screen, we'll see what we would expect to see. The number, if it's large enough, would have a comma in it. Another thing that is commonly something that happens over time in Classic, what we're showing here is how do I move subtotals around. So over time, when new columns are added or updated to VisionPlex screens, sometimes subtotals can get misaligned. So on this particular report, the sum of the inventory quantity obviously is not 10, right? It's way more than 10. So that's your first indication that something is a little bit off on this particular report. So in this case, 10 is actually the count of rows that this report returns. And that's, for whatever reason, in an incorrect column. Maybe we turned on a few columns and it bumped over where that quantity originally displayed. So to edit that, in design mode, there is an option on the VisionPlex toolbar that says View Location, and that is a quick way to make an alignment feature show up. So you see the X and Y coordinates, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, and so forth of all the different fields. So what we would do to put that field back to where it should be is we can right-click on the field, go to the Advanced tab, and set the column to 3. And sure enough, that puts the count of rows back where it needs to be in this case. So that helps with things where we have subtotals. In UX, luckily enough, I've not personally encountered this column alignment issue, so that's just an awareness thing for everyone. Natively in UX, if you're adding, moving columns around in your reports, this particular issue does not seem to be something that has been, that at least I've encountered as of yet in the last year and a half or so in UX. So that is a specific issue to managing classic screens. Another common feature that we see, renaming fields. So what everyone knows as is glossarization. When we change a label within a module, sometimes that field is pulled into a report, right? And maybe we notice that the name that the report uses isn't aligned with, as an organization, how we've determined to label that field. So in this page, in this particular, for instance, we've glossarized the planar field, and the report does not pick up that glossarization. So it would help out people in your organization if we name the field on the report what it's called on the screen where we maintain that information, right? So to do that, in design mode, we right-click on the field, and there is a way to actually rename the column title. And so that's where you would actually put whatever the term that you have glossarized for that particular field, and we hit update, and then that would display with the name that your team is used to seeing. The same change can also be made in UX. So to rename a field, we would do something very similar. So in this particular case, part number is what shows in the report natively. In a lot of different screens, part number, we all know that part number is typically abbreviated as part no. So to actually make that change when you're in design mode and you click on the field, that allows us to define a header name. So in this particular case, the Plex field was named part number on the VisionPlex report, and we're just going to update the header name to say part no, and that would update the label for us in the filter area and also the column header within the search grid. One thing to share about near real-time data. So Plex authored screens run on the live database and will return information for us live. If screens that you have developed internally can be made into VisionPlex screens as well, and that's something that does require a little bit more of programming experience. So that's a little bit beyond what we had intended to get into today, but just as a visual indication for everyone, if a particular screen is running on near real-time data, the way that you can readily determine that, there will be, in the classic filter box, there will be a timestamp that tells you when the most recent Plex refresh of that data was. So in this particular case, we see that updated timestamp will show in the filter box as shown here. And this particular data timestamp does not show in UX filters. So that that's something to be aware of, just from a classic perspective, as far as how that label can display. Another thing that we wanted to share, let's say that there's multiple people in your organization that are have some level of confidence in doing some of these edits that we've discussed today, and can turn on different fields and make changes to screens. Something to be aware of, conceptually similar to how the document control system works. If one person has a screen checked out, that means it's not available for another user to check that out. So in this particular case, you're alerted right away if you try to go revise a screen that someone else currently has checked out. And the way that we typically handle that, you would pick up the phone, call your colleague and say, hey, let's publish your change or relinquish it so that I can make my change. And that's a way of managing that. If let's say that someone leaves the organization and they're no longer around, the only means to undo a checkout like this would be to reactivate that individual's user account, log in as them, navigate to that VisionPlex page, and undo their checkout. So that's just a good habit to be in, and we'll show what the checkout process looks like so you guys can get a feel for check-ins and checkouts. Along the same lines, the same type of banner message shows in UX if a screen is currently checked out. So if I attempt to make a new checkout, you'll notice on this particular screenshot that we see that we're given a warning that the screen is already checked out at this level by Kevin Poppe. So that displays for us as well at this level. Okay, so at this point, we'll take a quick pause. Any questions with the content reviewed thus far? If not, we will go ahead and proceed with the live demo portion of the walkthrough. All right. So we have about 20 minutes left. So what we'll spend some time doing, we'll go through Classic and UX as well, and look at a specific report, enable some fields, and leave some time for questions at the end of the session, okay? So I'm already on the menu in Classic for VisionPlex Screen List. Like we had talked about during the slideshow, standard grid as a layout option is a way that we would typically set this filter. And let's just say that we want to see every report in the module production tracking. So we can press search and see everything that shows available to us here. So a lot of content, right? Plex does leave notes on things when things are published like this. Very specialized, select customers only. So to avoid confusion, these sort of comments help us determine what's actually going to be worth pursuing to see if it's maybe something you can adapt and utilize. So these comments I found are pretty helpful over time. In this particular case, we just want to look at the daily shift report. So we're going to click into the daily shift report, and it launches the VisionPlex page daily shift report in run mode, so that we can actually search this screen and see what sort of information it returns. So on this particular report, I'm going to set some filters, and we're just searching in our control and partner piecing in. There's not any actual real production data. So I'm going to open up the date range here. And we see what content the report has. So to actually go into design mode on the screen, from my hover menu, I select the option design mode. and we see all of the different fields that are available on the filter and also the bottom grid here. And on this particular page, the VisionPlex assistant here is telling us that I already have this screen checked out. So I'm currently in enterprise design mode. We're actually going to look at this page, how it would look when you initially entered the screen. So down towards the middle, we see the VisionPlex assistant, and we're prompted to make a decision. Do we want to do an enterprise checkout, company, or personal? In this case, we're going to say enterprise. Okay, so to enable a new filter field, if I right-click anywhere on the field, edit properties, select general, I want to make the visible property true. And then after the page reloads, it gives us sort of a reminder of what we've done thus far, right? So we have the Work Center group now enabled as a filter field. Looking at some of this particular report is different in that there are multiple grids available to us. So what this means is, from a filtering perspective, we can slice and dice the same information a few different ways. So there's one that's grouped by Department of Work Center. There's another one that's grouped by job part operation. So that's available to us as a filter option. And when we group by different options here, that makes information from the different group bys display on the screen. So let's say for this particular group by, we want to enable a new column. So scrolling over here towards the right side of the grid, and I know it's really hard to read, but you do notice the different color, right? So the darker shade of gray. So let's say that we want to enable the labor rate. So to do that, I would right click on the column, select general, and set the visible property to true. Another thing that we looked at during the slideshow, there is the properties panel. So we can click on the panel icon. So I'm going to right click, edit properties, and I can view the data source and the filters and columns that are available for us to enable. A lot more additional fields, right, that we can enable. So department managers, so that's not enabled by default. If I want to turn that on, I can select that. Same deal with the filters. If there's additional filters to enable, those would show here as well. We also talked about renaming fields. So how would I rename a field? So there's part number. So if I right click on part number and hit general, I could rename this CMS part number, Control and Solutions part number. A lot of times we see organizations do that if reports have an internal part and a customer part. So a change like that could potentially be something that you would want to consider. Okay. So now that we've made a few changes that we see in yellow, if I select Finalize Changes and Publish, it asks me, are you sure you would like to publish the screen? We're going to say yes. And then to get back to run mode that your users would actually interact with, there is, if we can see what a little toolbar option is, there's an option on the toolbar that allows us to go into run mode now that we've published those changes. And what we should expect to see, we see our Work Center group filter. And if we actually run this, we should see the update that we made to the name of the part number. And so that's a quick couple of changes in Classic daily shift report. About 5 minutes, on time, so let's try to make those quick changes in UX as well, so we're leaving enough time for questions. So in UX, I'm on the VisionPlex screen menu, and again, I can search by module if I would like to. So let's just search for everything in production tracking. And we see all of the screens that are available to us to investigate and see what they return. In this particular case, daily shifts is what we're interested in. We're going to click into this report. Okay. So it lets us know that we're currently in read-only mode. We haven't made a checkout as of yet, right? We're just interested in seeing what this report has to offer. So at this level, we can browse the various different columns and just sort of glance and see what's available. But important reminder, if we do want to make changes, we do need to make that checkout. So we're going to make an enterprise level checkout. Okay, and we get the banner message confirming that we're now in enterprise checkout. Any changes will impact all PCNs in your organization. And at this level, now we can start to go select the different fields that we want to enable. So as I clicked on Work Center Group, the Properties panel showed up over here on the right-hand side. So Work Center Group is the filter element. Yes, we want to make this visible. And as soon as we do that, it's no longer shaded gray any longer. Along the same lines, in the grid column, we're going to scroll over and find some of the reports that are not enabled by default. And let's say that we want to enable labor rate. So we click on the labor rate column, set the visible property to true. Okay, and we had also talked about how to enable the various different actions on the action bar as well. So in UX, there's a ton of different export options here, right? So what are all these different export options? So notice in this particular report, there's multiple different data panels or grids available to us here. So those export options each derive how the export works based on the various different group bys available to this page. And you'll see this when we actually run the report. So the export as option, this will dynamically show the correct option based on how you're filtered on the screen. So, and as you can tell, some of them are dark gray. So this would be something that's not currently enabled. And it tells us that this particular export option references a source for the Department Work Center summary. So if that's something that does need to be enabled based on how you're grouping the report, you can do that at this level by setting the visible property to checked, and then that would show when you're looking at this particular group by. To rename a field in UX, let's also look at that. So the part number field, as soon as we select the particular field, it shows us the header name. So we can make that say CMS part number. And as we're typing, the option on the screen automatically updates for us here. So that change is made. And to go ahead and commit these changes, we press the save option. And we are starting to spill into the question and answer time, so we'll go ahead and make this check-in as soon as the screen loads. At this point, let's go ahead and open it up for questions. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask about any of the content reviewed today, or anything else?
Are you going to have this recorded that we could get a copy?
Yes, absolutely. So our YouTube channel will be updated with this recording, and I will, after this check-in processes, we'll actually go back to the slideshow, and there's a few more slides with details on how to access that.
Awesome.
And some of the upcoming tests as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're just pressing check in here.
Kevin, this is Diane Keyser from Engeltool. I have a question for you. Two. I actually have two. For the checkout, is there a way similar to in the document control system admin where you can look to see documents that are checked out in the event somebody forgot to check something back in? Is there such a view as well for VisionPlex screens? And then my second question is, if we, to date, I have not been putting things, publishing things in the enterprise mode, just in company, because I recall when I first was learning it, and we are a single PCN, I tried to check out as enterprise and it said I couldn't because we were a single PCN. I just tried it and tested and it's letting me. So I don't know what the difference is there, but the question is there a way to convert the ones that I have done to be enterprise without having to reinvent every wheel if I were to go there?
Good question. There is not a way to promote or advance checkouts you've made from personal to company or company to enterprise. I believe in the screen when you run it, it will, if you've not published the changes, it does show you in a different color, so you can sort of see the pending differences. So that might be an option, but if it's something that you've already published, that wouldn't be something that you could readily look at the screen and see what has changed. So yeah, that would be a matter of you going back through in enterprise mode and making those changes to get it advanced to the enterprise level. And on your first question, I'm not certain if there is a PCN-wide report, but that is a good question. I can see how that would definitely be relevant and helpful. I know at a screen level, you can see what the pending changes are and who has something checked out. I'm not sure at the company level. So let me put that on my to-do list and send you an email on that one.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask one other as long as I have you here too then? So I've looked at a couple of screens in UX that I had made changes to in Classic, and there seems to be, and this is very unscientific, but there seems to be a disconnect or an inconsistency on which screens are transferring from Classic to UX with my changes and which aren't. I don't know if you know any of the method to the madness in their conversions as to what we can expect to see on screens being similar or having to be recreated in UX.
Yeah, I've not personally encountered any particular checkouts from Classic being pushed to UX automatically. Maybe it was a label or a glossarization thing that you noticed that just automatically transferred. But as you guys noticed, when I'm in the same PCN here when I'm flipping back and forth between these two tabs. So when I made the changes to the daily shift report here, I still had to go in right away to UX and enable the Work Center group, even though I made that to the classic daily shift report. So yeah, I've not been aware of anything automatically transferring if it was first published in classic. That one might be something for the community if there was some level of method to the madness for how things are mapped. I was not aware that existed. If it does.
Okay, thank you very much.
Huh? Other questions, or maybe perhaps recommendations for other VisionPlex things that you would like to see addressed in maybe a follow-up session?
Kevin, I think that if people want to send ideas for the follow-up session, maybe you can show them the last slide on the screen. They can see Jill's email and they can send the request to her.
Oh, perfect. 2 slides. Just to kind of recap, so the next session will be IntelliPlex Basics with Veronica, going through some common needs for how to best leverage IntelliPlex. Definitely go ahead and email Jill if you'd like to attend that session. And just for awareness for the coming weeks for everyone, the week of May 11th, a big week for PowerPlex, so we will not be conducting a workshop that week, but do feel free to pencil these into your PowerPlex agenda. We have a handful of workshops conducted by Control+M here, and those specific sessions are shown here for you.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Bye.